following guest is one of the great quarterbacks in Notre Dame history. He's also one of the quarterbacks in Browns history. His hair is better than yours, every one of you. His abs have abs. Having him and Tom Brady both at Fox might put them over the handsomeness cap. 2 minutes before this interview, he was doing a party pump in the green room. Everybody suck in your gut, and please welcome Brady Quinn. Yeah. That's an introduction right there.
What an introduction. Yeah. What an introduction.
Brady Quinn is
Thank you for that.
Also, part of the Big Noon Kickoff with Fox Sports and Two Pros and a Cup of Joe, the radio show right before us. And Brady Quinn is in the house. How was that intro there?
That was unique. That was one of the first.
Okay.
I think anytime you're mentioned in the same context as Tom Brady, it's usually a good thing.
Okay.
Although I haven't posed in my boxers recently, so I'm not going to at any point.
I saw that. Did Tom lose a bet where he had to pose in his boxers?
I mean, that's one way of looking at it. I mean, he is single.
Yeah, but it feels like he's trying to move product here. Like you have a bet.
It did feel like it was kind of a dual purpose there, right? Like maybe it's moving product, a little catchy, right? Create some waves, but at the same time, it's like, hey, I still look pretty good too.
Is there a rift between you and Brady now that he's coming to Fox?
No.
Okay.
No. I was fortunate enough to grow up in an era where I idolized him in high school and kind of those formative years playing quarterback. And then I get to Notre Dame, and at that point in time, when I went to play for Ty Willingham, you're paying attention to his career, but you're not watching it as closely when you get his former offensive coordinator to be my head coach, Charlie Weiss. And so for the next 2 years of my life, I watched more film on him than I did myself in practice because I was trying to mimic everything that he was doing and how he ran the offense in New England and how Charlie wanted the offense run in Notre Dame. So I've always had the utmost respect for him, the way he's managed himself, his career, and probably just because I'm like one of those meatheads who loved working out. His sacrifice in the offseason and what he did when no one else was watching and how he prepared his body to be able to play until he's 45, I think that's one of the things that stands out the most. Like, we can talk about accolades and his poise and composure and certain points in Super Bowls, but it's the sacrifice that he was willing to make that no one else was willing to make over the course of their entire lifespan playing in the NFL.
But there have been so many more talented quarterbacks. But arm strength, speed, everything. But why Tom Brady?
I don't think you can measure what's inside him, right? Whether it's his heart, whether that's that chip on his shoulder. I kind of related it to, seeing the Jordan documentary, which everyone watched, obviously, over the course of the pandemic. And you remember some of the stories like, the flu game and all this other stuff. And you're like, wait a second. He was just making this all up to motivate himself. And it's like somewhere in the back of Tom Brady's mind, he remembers that he was still a 6th-round pick. And he was the 2nd pick, if I'm not mistaken, of the New England Patriots in that draft. And I think he would carry it with him wherever he went. I think he'd carry it with him that people would say what you just said, that he's not the most talented or he's not this or he's not that. And meanwhile, it still has allowed him to be the most successful and the greatest of all time, in my opinion.
Do you think he was addicted to football?
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool, too. I got 3 little girls, and I'm like praying and waiting for the moment where they start to be like addicted to a sport and something that's like healthy and awesome for them that they can learn from. And I think my oldest daughter, Sloan's starting to get there now with soccer. Like they lost the other day. They lost in 7 games. They were 7-1. They're crushing. So an all-girls team playing against a bunch of boys teams and all that. And so they're doing great. But they lost. And she looked at me. She's like, Dad, I want to go home and practice. And I was like, that's awesome. And she kept wanting to practice. And finally, I was like, okay, I want to go inside and do something else. So,
but you don't think it could be detrimental that Brady couldn't walk away from it?
No, and I think we've publicly seen some of the sacrifices that he's had to make. And that's a choice that we all have to make, though, with our own lives, right? I mean, we all make choices.
But how common do you think this is?
Oh, incredibly uncommon. I mean, again, it goes back to the sacrifice he made in the offseason to prepare his body and all that, and the sacrifices that he made personally and even professionally to some degree, too, with, I think, how he even manages his own brand. Whereas now, he is the brand, right? It's the Brady brand. He's got his name on it, and he's got to pose in boxers and without any clothes on.
And also, people say, well, Tom, he'll be an announcer. Troy says, just be yourself. And it's not that easy. And Albert Breer from the Monday Morning Quarterback said, Tom has maybe compromised himself because he is friends with people. Is he going to be critical of those people? How honest can you be? When you make that transition where now all of a sudden they go, you got an opinion on somebody.
Yeah.
and then that person hears what your opinion is, and then you're like, well, I'm sorry.
Oh, I was already getting it this year. I mean, Jets fans obviously were saying some stuff about it, and I'd been there for half a season, and I had a buddy with the Giants who was giving me some flack about it, which is funny because, I mean, I root for all those guys. You know, people who've been around that work in the industry, you root for them, but at the same time, people are obviously asking you for betting advice. It's part of your job as an analyst now. That's become so much more part of what we're asked to do. And you have to be real with what you think is going to happen. Now, you're not going to be right, but, you know, that's part of the job, part of what comes with it. I think it's harder I'll put it this way. If anyone can be critical, I'm pretty sure it's Tom Brady. Like, I'm pretty sure he can be
But I don't
the
know
one.
if it's in
It might not be in him, and it might not be who he is, but I guess what's easier for him is to be like, well, I'm the greatest of all time. So if I say that, like, this guy should have done this, I think most people are going to be like, oh, yeah, it's Tom Brady. Like, if it's Brady Quinn saying it, they're like, that guy didn't make it. Like, he's a joke. Get out of here. You know? So it's like two completely different spectrums. Like, it's harder for me to be critical, I think in part because, like, I know how hard it is. And now he knows how hard it is too. But the difference is, like, there's certain things that came pretty easy to Tom Brady. So when he sees bad football, he's probably going to acknowledge bad football.
I came in a couple of Mondays after watching Mahomes play on Saturday. And, you know, Texas Tech wasn't a great football team. And they were always, you know, in a shootout because it was Big 12 football. I didn't know if he could play in the NFL at a high level. I just thought it was fascinating to watch somebody play the position. And plus, it's Texas Tech quarterbacks. So you're thinking, all right, everybody puts up big numbers.
Right.
But he had this innate ability to almost have a calmness and he freelanced, it felt like, back there. He was running a pro offense or his offense when he was at Texas Tech. But I didn't know that would translate to this. What did you think? And there were a lot of doubters about him that maybe he was a gunslinger and trying to be Brett Favre-like.
Yeah, I always go back to the matchup between Oklahoma with Baker Mayfield and Patrick Mahomes there in Lubbock. We got to call that matchup, and Joe Davis was doing play-by-play. And at one point, we looked at each other in the booth. We're like, we're going to have to change our flights. Like, everyone kept scoring back and forth so much. We're like, we're never going to go home at this point. But it was one of those moments where I thought to myself, what's going to happen is people are going to overlook in their evaluation the fact that he's doing things that he's literally carrying this team. Their defense was very bad during the course of time he was there at Texas Tech. And people are going to knock him to say, oh, he wasn't a winner. And it's like, can we just pump the brakes on that and then look what he was dealing with every single game when you have to put up 40, 50 points in order to win? It was a heavy burden to carry. And I think what people sometimes overlook is they're like, well, you can't play like that in the NFL. Well, yeah, you can if you have his skill set and if you have the right situation and circumstance, which he does in Kansas City. You know, playmakers, one of the greatest head coaches of all time in Andy Reid, who can put him in those positions to succeed.
But if he went to the Bears,
it'd be a much more difficult climb. Like, I mean, I think you can make that case with any quarterback. We opened up talking about Tom Brady. If he's not with Bill Belichick to start, how does his career look different? And I think that's where, you know, we praise quarterbacks so much for what they do, but it's still the ultimate team sport. And the coaches that are involved in the front office, everyone who makes it possible, they still play a much bigger role than I think anyone on the outside realizes.
How do you explain, you know, the draft is loaded with these players, but especially a quarterback where you go, that guy made it and that guy didn't.
Yeah.
Jalen Hurts lost his job. Now maybe we thought he was just going to be a backup or a curiosity. And then all of a sudden, first playoff game didn't look that good. And now here he is and, you know, an MVP candidate.
It just goes back to what's on the inside. You know, I think Jalen Hurts is the type of young man that from his time at Alabama to Oklahoma to Philly, every single year he's continued to get better and better and grow from that. I think one of the tough things is when everyone's doubting you is to keep your confidence in yourself and your abilities. And there's some guys who are better doing that than others. And I think Jalen's an example of someone who's done a much better job of believing in himself, believing in what he's capable of, but also finding that right situation and circumstance. I mean, let's not kid ourselves. 17 players are either starters or Pro Bowl alternates in the Pro Bowl or whatever the heck that is nowadays. But it goes to show you how talented this team is. And so when you're on a talented team like that, you're not pressed to do quite the same things that Joe Burrow was asked to do when he first got to Cincy. And then as they've built out around him, I mean, his job's gotten a little easier. There's still a lot of heavy carrying there, though.
Can the Eagles win a shootout?
Yeah, I think so. I think they can. And because I think they're, to me, I look at it two ways. I don't know that it's going to be a shootout because I think they're so dominant on both sides of the ball. You know, when you look at the depth they have defensively, obviously everyone's going to talk about the pressure and sacks, but they've also improved in the rush defense. I mean, there's some missed tackles, and you can see that in the NFC Championship game. But when they brought in Linval Joseph and Ndamukong Suh, they started to shore up some of that. And those guys are experienced guys who've been there before.
So you like the Eagles?
You know what this game feels like? This game feels similar to, and I know the dynamics are different on offense for the Chiefs, where their offensive line was banged up when they faced Tampa. But you saw Patrick Mahomes running around for his life. And the Chiefs are much improved on their offensive line in this matchup. But Mahomes is still hampered with the ankle. I don't know how close he'll be to 100%. You know, he moved around pretty well despite that in the AFC Championship game. But that's my concern, is you've got a group, a defensive front that I don't think you can't give too much help to one side or another. And I think they match up pretty well too in the secondary. So that affords Jonathan Gannon the opportunity to either get pressure with 4 or bring pressure from time to time. And that's where, if Mahomes isn't as mobile, he could be getting a lot of hits on him with that front. I just think they're that dominant the way they've played this year.
Talking to Brady Quinn from Fox Sports, also the big noon kickoff on Fox. Then you have Zach Wilson. And he was the one guy I thought if there's a bust, it was going to be him because he was a one-year starter. And I don't even know if he was scheduled to start, you know, his final year in college. But he goes to the Jets, and, you know, there's that. I don't know what you bring in when you're that, you know, picked high. Like, do you have to walk in as I'm the guy?
Yeah.
Or do you have to walk in and say, you know, how do we become successful? It almost felt like it was an I versus we when he got there. But how do you explain somebody who had that talent but is probably going to be a backup, you know, in the near future?
I always said this just in evaluating him in that draft class in particular. Because of the COVID year, their schedule was changed. They played basically a group of 5 schedule, and probably his most difficult game that final year was the Coastal Carolina game. They were a good team that year. We all got to see, you know, that group and Grayson McCall and all those players. But they brought more pressure on him. He struggled. And when you go back through the previous years watching him play, I never really saw a player that was ready to be interjected to start playing right now. And when you're drafted number 2 overall, that's what the team's telling you, is you're going to play your rookie year. You're probably going to play right away, or at least you should. So I think anyone who was a Jets fan, or even anyone in the front office who thought he was going to come in right away and be able to showcase his arm talent or some of his mobility and that skill set, they had to have all the pieces around him. The rookie year, they didn't have it. Now they've continued to build on that roster, I think, when the offensive line is healthy, when Breece Hall's healthy, with Garrett Wilson, a wide receiver, and the rest of the wide receiving core, that's a very talented roster. Now it's just a matter of, you know, him being to the spot where he can manage all of that and operate their system. The issue is you're now on a different offensive coordinator. Nathaniel Hackett, you know, jumps in that spot. I personally, you know, and I said, I just, look, I didn't have him as high ranked as other people did for that draft class, but I also hated the way Robert Saleh handled it this year. You know, if you're going to, you need to find out what you have in him. You need to let him work through that adversity. You made the draft pick, so own up to it. And even though if you're worried about losing the locker room, that's on Zach to figure out. That's not on you. You know, you got to play him. You got to, you know, force him to go through those growing pains and see if he can't come out on the other side stronger and better from it. And then that way you have a much better idea of where he's at. You know, I think this year with the way they handled the situation, I think it's more of a question mark than it would have been had they just let him play through the season. At least after 2 years, we would have said, okay, we kind of know where we're at now with him.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Yankees when they had Jabba Chamberlain. Whenever he got into trouble, they'd pull him out of a game. And he never got to pitch out of adversity. And that's where you find out who you are and what you're all about is, hey, I mean, Tom Brady's down 28-3. If he didn't have moments before that, he'd get to 28-3 and go, oh, I'm going to get embarrassed here. They're going to call me overrated. Like he was like, no. One play at a time, one touchdown, you know, all of those things that your coaches, you know, teach you. We're talking to Brady Quinn. These quarterbacks coming out now, you do so much homework on college football. The one guy that can't miss at the quarterbacking position is...
In this year's draft?
Yes.
No, thanks.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, we're know-it-alls. Here's after the fact.
Thanks.
You know, I told you it's Zach Wilson.
Well,
and you know, we're not taping this, so don't even worry about whatever you say, Brady.
I would say this, based on watching his tape and knowing everything about him, it's to me, it's Bryce Young. Now, everyone's going to question you about his size, his height, his weight, all that. Is he durable enough? Will he be durable enough? I can't answer that. I mean, the team that he gets drafted to and how they protect him and how they put things around him, that'll probably more, you know, define what happens the rest of the way. But he is such a unique talent in the way he's able to navigate the pocket, keep his eyes downfield, shape throws, but throw awkwardly too. I mean, just the way he's able to put the ball in spots, whether it's short, intermediate, downfield, and he's got enough arm strength. You know, he's not as strong as Will Levis. He's not as strong as Anthony Richardson. But he's the one that, if I was a team drafting, I would take him number 1 overall. Even before he started, I was enamored just watching this first spring game and watching him play and how he plays the game. He kind of has a Steph Curry feel to him, where you look at him and if you focus too much on the fact he's not, the biggest, most athletic guy, you're going to miss some of the special skill that he has.
Well, I think Anthony Richardson, we love potential.
Oh, yeah.
And Anthony, I had a scout tell me early in the year, he's like Ben Roethlisberger. And I go, okay.
No, he's way more dynamic
Is he
than Ben.
Dante Culpepper?
He's more dynamic than Dante. I would say.
Is he's first 15 picks?
His top-end talent, he's got the highest ceiling of anyone. I mean, that young man, when you put on the tape and you see him play well, you just go, oh, if he can just put this together consistently, that's something special. I mean, even at times like the Tennessee game in particular, you see times when he kind of navigates the pocket with his feet, snaps his feet around, makes an accurate throw.
Is he Kaepernick?
No, because I think his motion is more refined and more fluid. Kaepernick seemed raw. It seemed like he had his baseball background, and you could see that in his throwing motion and his mechanics.
Are you in love?
I'm not going that. I'd say I'm more in love with Bryce Young. Like I gush over Bryce Young at times. You know, I texted Leinart this. I think it was earlier this year. And I just said to him, I enjoy watching Bryce Young play. Like, there's just something about the way he plays the game. With Richardson, you can just see the potential, and you can see what he can become. But we all get caught up in this whole, hey, who's the next Josh Allen? and that's all. Like, there's only one Josh Allen. Now, there's a Will Levis, there's Anthony Richardson, guys who've showcased the ability where you see that top end, but at times you also see the floor, and you're like, all right, well, the NFL is about, like, trying to limit how much you play at your floor, but then seeing how close you can get to playing at that ceiling as much as you can within your skill set. And so both Will Levis and Anthony Richardson, I think, are first-round talents if you base it on their upside. But at times you're going to watch their tape and go, all right, I can see why if they slid, that's probably why. Teams are concerned about the lack of ability to develop them because no one develops quarterbacks now, and obviously not having the right situation to allow them to succeed.
It's great to see you. We're here at the baseball stadium here. I didn't know.
Which makes complete sense, right? We're here at the Super Bowl, and you guys are at a baseball stadium.
Yeah. Well, the football field was taken.
Can you name a football player that's played in this stadium for the San Francisco Giants?
A football player.
Huh. This should be a layup, by the way.
A football player who played in this stadium.
No one's there.
Let's
think about
Anyone?
Anyone?
Oh, Seton?
Man, I don't know why Russell Wilson popped into my head, but maybe he had like
Kyler Murray?
Well, okay, how does I say from his college days?
Oh, you tell us.
Jeff Samardzija.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
nice. Yeah. Oh.
Okay.
Oh, obviously Jeff Samardzija.
Yeah, obviously, right? Yeah, you guys are all there.
Notre Dame. Wow. Okay.
I mean, it's
Can
just-
you spell Samardzija?
Oh, man. I think I was asked to do this in college one time. So it's Samar. This is where it gets tough. So it's like Dijza or something like that. How far off?
Not bad. Samardzi.
DZIJA. There you go. Mix those two up.
Jeff is 2 F's.
Oh, yeah. And it's not G off. It's Jeff.
Yeah. What? Or you guys having a debate about 1 or 2 F's on the Jeff here?
No,
What's
no.
happening?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
I don't know any Jeffs with 1 F with a J. Is that a thing?
No, it's just
Okay.
GEOFF. We don't like people with names.
All right, we'll take a break. If you're watching on Peacock, Brady is going to show us his arm strength there.
Oh, I thought I was doing the golf stuff.
Well, you can do that too,
Oh,
but
okay.
we want to see if you can throw it from right field to the infield.
Oh, God. Okay.
Can you do that?
I'll try. I might throw my arm out. I haven't thrown a ball in, I don't know, it's been a while.
There's a hospital right across the street in case.
Perfect. You know what? You guys can take me in the Sprinter van.
Oh, okay. I like that.
With some of the Traeger, the barbecue we're getting. And we can go by the Charlo Lodge, too, while we're at it.
Brian Cranston's going to join us top of the hour. We'll come back here on the Dan Patrick Show after this.